Are you looking for a place to meet like-minded people? Perhaps you're a light worker looking for a safe place to share your thoughts and services. We've got a place for you. IntuiTalks.com. Join for free, post updates, blogs, create and join groups via website or radio or class package. The possibilities are endless. Join the all-spiritual, all-on-one-roof network, www.IntuiTalks.com.
Welcome everybody to the first Altered States show of the year, actually forever. I'm here with our wonderful, and I've given her a voice at last, Kathleen-Moore. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Very excited about this tonight.
Me too. I love working with you. I love talking to you. Now, I need to warn everybody, Kathleen and I have opinions, and we're not afraid to use them.
Absolutely.
Not even a little bit. Absolutely. The idea is that we share our expertise with you, which between us is considerable. I think we must be hitting into that 40-year range, right, between us somewhere, of experience of professional readers, professional mediums, professional people. We are not, however, your doctor, your psychoanalyst. We are not, however, here to fix you up. We're here to scare the bejeebers out of you with stories about what goes bump in the night. And it's an interesting subject because you do get asked it, right? We do see a lot of shows, don't we, where you've got, especially British. I don't know if you see many British ghost hunting shows, but honestly, the psychics are leaping all over the place.
Right,
they're
jumping.
Freaking out. Yeah, they're freaking out. And I actually watched one day where the clairvoyant was giving some pretty decent information, and I was thinking, oh, this could be a good one. Next thing you know, she leaps out of her chair about 3 feet. She goes, I felt something. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that what you're there for? It cracks me up. And, of course, the thing about that is for everybody else, it seems very scary. You know, it seems like something that could go horribly wrong without too much effort. And, of course, the art of scaring people has been in the mediums round for years because everybody still talks about my cheesecloth, right? My cheesecloth. You know about that, do you?
Yes.
When I was doing Keepers of the Light, that became like a joke for about 3 months. And they did that to scare the people, though, didn't they? You know, to say, look, there's something physically here, and it's so physical, it comes out of my body. It might get you. And the idea was to keep people enthralled. It was the original freak show, really, wasn't it? It was the original scare yourself silly, a horror show.
The fear of the unknown.
Have you got the fear of the unknown? And just making it just about touch you, right? So just about touch you. Just enough for you to go, oh, I don't know about that. So have you got something you want to share specifically on this? Jackie's saying, I can't stand those shows. They all jump to evil energy when I think it's just more likely someone who just wants their presence known. Well, there's a lot about that as well. So, Kathleen, we'll let you dive on out and tell everybody what you would like to say to start the subject matter off. Let's go, baby.
Over the years, I've done a lot of house cleansings or a lot where people have, there's something here. I felt like I got pushed. Somebody says, I woke up with scratches and all this Hollywood hoopla. And a lot of people, I call it hoopla, Hollywood hoopla. Some people truly believe that. And I think sometimes, like Jackie said, they immediately jump to the evil energy. In fact, I did a house cleansing about a month and a half ago now. I did a house cleansing where the gentleman who was very even keel was, I don't believe in this stuff and everything. And then he said he started getting choked in his sleep and there was incidences in his house and he wants me to come cleanse it, and I go there and I was cleansing, and I'm like, immediately the spirit stepped forward and was, I don't know why they think I'm trying to kill him. I said, well, you're choking him. And he says, I'm not choking him. He stops breathing in his sleep. I'm waking him up. So we automatically, because of Hollywood, we automatically jump into the conclusion of, when we feel spirit energy or we're being woken up or we have these manifestations, we automatically assume it's this unknown source or this unknown unseen spirit that's coming in that's trying to hurt us and, trying to take over our bodies and everything because Hollywood has told us that's the norm. It's amazing how many of us really truly believe, we know Hollywood isn't real, but we're so inclined to expect what we see on TV, and the simple fact is they're just not going to jump into your body, and I've never seen a case in my experience where a spirit that has no physical form has been able to physically hurt somebody. Now, I have seen them manifest what I call physical manifestation when somebody is extremely stressed or is carrying a lot of soul clutter or is going through a stressful time. And there's spirit energy around where their physical manifestation will come out in their sleep, in their deep REM. It's almost like sleepwalking. That's what I compare it to, sleepwalking. But this particular spirit was going on and on. He says, they all think I'm trying to kill him, and I'm blinking lights, and I'm making it known that I'm here, and I'm trying to keep him alive because he needs to be alive for something in the future. So I said, so do you have sleep apnea? And he's like, no, not that I know of. And then, his brother says, well, he could peel the paint off of the side of the house next door. He snores so loud. Right. So the spirit energy was actually trying to help him, trying to wake him up, trying to save him. And they automatically assumed it was a poltergeist or this evil energy that was coming in and trying to take over the living. And the simple fact is they just don't really want to be living again. They don't want to come back. They don't want to jump into, if they're going to come back, they're going to come back and enjoy the whole experience again. They're not going to jump into an overweight 60-something-year-old man's body that doesn't work all the time.
He's got sleep apnea. Yeah. He's got sleep apnea. And so his wife won't sleep with him, so he doesn't get any sex either, right? So they're not even going to get that, It's like, wouldn't you jump into like a 25-year-old gorgeous person, right?
Right. Or,
right.
Rich and famous.
They'd be all doomed, wouldn't they?
Right. So
could you imagine anybody under the age of 30 would be doomed because, when I go, I'm doing that. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm doing that. There's no pissing around with mediums. I'm not interested in being channeled. I'm jumping into the 20-something.
Right. And that's what and people they get very tunnel vision on what they've heard or have known, or they, that the ghosts are always going to come out or the spirits are going to come out and hurt them. And when they do these paranormal investigations, they're always saying that too, that they feel, this oppressive energy. And I'm like, the energy is probably actually feeling the spirit energy. It has nothing to do with, I always love it when people do the prison investigations. I went on one of these investigations once when we were in this prison. It's fairly well known, the Mansfield prison here in Ohio. And, everybody was like, I'm not getting anything on my meter in the cells. And I'm like, well, why would you? They spent their entire physical lives in that cell. They're not going to be in there. They're free to roam.
You go a stage earlier too, and that's the point I'd like to bring up. People try to apply physiological limitations to an entity that has none,
right.
And that's the very thing that also causes problems for manifestation, right? Mm-hmm. For actual manifestation. I put this picture up because it's a very old painting. One of the important things to talk about also is it's not just Hollywood. We didn't have Hollywood when I was growing up. All we had was British TV. And in Britain, there's not that much Hollywood either, actually. They have more British TV. But if we go back before TV, it was still there. And back then they were calling people witches. Then they were talking about demons. And the truth is that we have a sleep paralysis, genuine thing that happens to people. And when you wake up or get a level of consciousness, and this is a big deal, a level of consciousness before you can actually physically move your body, it feels like something's holding you down. It absolutely feels that way. I've had the experience myself many, many times, and knowing that there was nothing holding me down. Now, if you happen to be also crossing through a yucky dream, it's a very unpleasant sensation. I had this dream once. I've had some horrible dreams, just so you're all aware. I had this dream once that I was watching a man be drawn and quartered. He was tied up to two horses, and they were pulling his body apart, and I was starting to watch his flesh rend apart. It's terrible, I know. And I didn't want to dream that anymore, but I was an observer in the dream, and I don't know whether I was just looking at something that happened in the past or whether it was a real dream, because it must have happened to somebody, I guess. But the whole point was that it was unpleasant. And as I came out of that, I wasn't for 1 minute thinking I was being haunted or having anything horrible. But I can remember trying, and I used to do this quite a lot because this is important for people developing psychically too, I guess. I had a lot of terrible dreams during that time. And this was one of them. And as I started to develop this idea that you can yell yourself awake. And so I would yell myself awake. I would be in my dream as I was in that state and starting to come out of it. I would be yelling full lungs. And then once I became conscious, I'd be going, ugh. It was just a croak, you know. It's pretty funny. And that's because your body isn't functioning that way. Otherwise, you would be yelling the house down every night. You know, it's a very unusual thing to cross that barrier. And for those that do it, they do sleepwalk. They do horrible things in their sleep. They do punch the partner out when they're having a horrible dream. And so it's an incredible thing that in a modern day in 2016 that's not taken into account when one is relating these type of experiences, because there's a lot of pure knowledge known about it with sleep clinics. There was that guy who always cracked me up. For whatever reason, he'd wake up in the middle of the night. It didn't do it every night, but when he did do it, he'd get up and he'd take the curtains down in his house, you know,
Wow.
in his bedroom. He'd climb up on the chair and he'd take the curtains down off the window. Now, you can get into all kind of psycho or spiritual babble about that, but he'd had a pretty good normal life, but he did it in his sleep. So something in his sleep made him do that. It might have even happened. Do you know, when he was a child, while he was sleeping, his mum might have changed the curtains or washed them. Who knows? It could be a very simple thing. But he's filmed in a sleep clinic doing it, and that's the weird thing. You're looking at somebody, you know they're asleep, and yet you'd swear they weren't. Now, he's behaving perfectly in the dark. He can see everything he's doing in the dark or not. He doesn't need to see what he... So there's this huge body of evidence about what goes on. And he doesn't remember a thing, whereas I remember nearly every dream I have, but I don't go anywhere or do anything, you know? I hope.
Right.
Have you seen me lately?
You know of.
Right. Have you seen me lately? So I thought I'd like to get that in there. And the reason I say it's not just Hollywood is this painting is a few hundred years old. And there are a lot of paintings like that. And it is depicting the weight on the chest and being held down by demons. So people have experienced this for forever. You know, it's a part of the sleep state, right. Waking state. Yeah. And the fear of what that might be, I would not hesitate to say comes from religion, where demonology has been put out there, I guess. And if you go back even further, you get those like the Tibetans saying it's all in your mind. They knew that about 500,000 or 600,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. They knew that it was all in your mind, and then we somehow lost that reality, and then we had to apply it to something. And that's what we do. We apply. You were absolutely right when you said, you know, people put a Hollywood spin on it, but I think they put what I call a fear spin on it. They're scared,
Absolutely.
And then they start asking their brain for a reason. And the only reasons available have been here since before we were born, literally before we were born, whether your parents were religious or not. I can remember Mum used to tell us, you know, if you got a bee sting or something, she'd say, that's God punishing you. She never went to church a day in her life, but we still got punished by God.
Right.
You know, so it invades your childhood in a lot of ways, you know, that you don't necessarily expect. And so that's a very interesting thing. So what would you say if you had a client that came to you and they felt that they had been injured by spirit? How would you deal with that? What would you say to them?
Well, I think it would depend on the situation. When I've had the experience of that, I've asked questions of what kind of stress level they're under. Is there some kind of manifestations that's going on? Is it sleepwalking? Are they taking medication? One of my clients actually takes a sleeping aid and actually drove to two towns over and back and doesn't remember it. And she's like, I was possessed. I was taken over. I don't remember it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, it was your sleeping aid. You know, I mean, it was a drug induced, and people have been sleepwalking and doing that stuff for years. And like you said, they manifest themselves with this dream. Like you said, you scream yourself awake.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are experiencing something. I'm like, did you have a dream that you remember? There's all different reasons why it would happen. I've actually, I guess I'm going to sound, a little cold here. I believe that the devil has been used as, you know, the finger point, let's point at the devil for for people's bad choices for centuries.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that when people carry great burden of guilt, even if it's something as little as, they lied on a test, or they, called off work when they really weren't sick or anything, people carry burden of guilt, and sometimes it'll manifest itself in sleeping. I think your soul gets rid of clutter when it's sleeping. If you don't sleep, if you're not a good sleeper and you don't get a certain amount of sleep, I do feel that you have a higher rate of that manifestation, because your physical sense of self and your soul is getting very cluttered. You got to let go of clutter, true. Just like you would a hoarded house. It's after a while it starts to spill over, and we fall into that deep exhaustive sleep that where it's deep. You can't, and you feel that. So I think your clutter comes off. The soul's like, I got to get rid of this. I got to clean house. So it comes out in different manifestations, and that's my belief on it. Now, are there negative spirits around? Are there negative energies that we can run into? Absolutely. I do believe that. I do believe that is souls that are stuck between this world and the other. They're scared to go towards the light because they don't know where they're going because of their religious upbringing and what they've been taught. You're going to go to hell if you didn't live a righteous life. Well, who the hell's lived a righteous life? Except us two. We have.
See,
but
we have.
Even it's everybody's had, if we look at it in the sense of religion, in almost all religions, there's this feeling. I think it's more about teaching right or wrong, but then they use it as a fear factor to bring chaos to, calm to chaos. Back in the time when we were in an extremely brutal place in the world.
Well, I think it's brutal now. I'm just going to be honest and say I don't think anything's really changed. Just the way that we've dealt with it has changed a little bit. Still not much. I think we're more compassionate in our punishment actually than we are in our crime, if that makes sense. We're certainly not more compassionate in war, or there's still brutality on every street in every country in the world, perpetuated by those who are either mentally unhealthy or just plain straight out arseholes, because there's that too. Not everybody who commits a crime is in actual fact mentally incapacitated. Sometimes it's substance, but whichever way we look at that, there's a bottom line, isn't there, that it's easy to ratify what we've done. There was a book called Something in the Rose, I can't remember. It's an old spiritual book. And I must admit that as I read it, I got really annoyed with the writer. It was a very popular spiritual book about 20-odd years ago. And she was in there talking about this guy who had beaten his wife. He was down on his luck. He was an addict. And then she's saying, I could see the six spirits around him making him a drug addict, and I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not there for that. Because straight away, he's got no responsibility, which is why he's a drug addict. Mm-hmm. He's a drug addict because he doesn't want the responsibility. So when we have this look at negative spirits, I'm always in two minds about that. I do figure that if somebody was miserable in life, there's not much chance they'll suddenly turn into a happy bean over death. It's quite likely that they're just miserable entities. It's an energy that's projected out there. I think as readers, we quite often look for the best in those people when somebody else wants a message, right? For obvious reasons, we don't want Daddy coming back and telling daughter bang bang. She's living her life, he's lived his. And I can remember when I was really in my early stages of reading, actually saying that they've had their go round. They don't get to do it for you.
Right.
So that's how I sort of see that. But I don't think that I see the word malicious, not personally. I've never seen malicious. I've seen dumb. Mm-hmm. But that's not the same thing as malicious. And I think that if we could be incredibly or even moderately easily influenced, because there's a lot more strength or power to anger, right, and maliciousness than there is to any other frequency out there that's for living or non-living. That energy is powerful. I can feel it batting across me at the world when I tell people things that I want to hear. You can feel it going
right.
a few thousand kilometers away. But when they're happy, you've got to listen for that. You've got to discern that, or you've got to watch their aura for that. So it's an interesting thing. When you get a person, for me, that believes that they can be oppressed physically or damaged physically by the dead,
right.
then I would have to say we'd be all goners. We'd be gone. There are so many violent, angry, dead people. We wouldn't
right.
have a show in hell of living our lives, you know. So if we go that they can't really do that, as you started the show out saying, that they can't really do that, then we need to come back, because I think if you think about it correctly, you can find the cause of your woes, you know, whether, whatever it is. You know, if you don't think about it correctly, it just goes on and on and on. And telekinesis may not have been completely proven, but there is an awareness that we can push energy out there. And so another person most definitely can feel it. Fritz Albert Pop, Dr. Fritz Albert Pop, Fritz with an R, Dr. Fritz Albert Pop stood on a veranda in a hotel in New York. He was guesting over there. He was German, and he looked down on the street and he'd watch a person walk into his view, and he'd watch them until they walked out of his view. And nearly every time they would turn around and look behind them or look around. He'd just pick any person, man or woman, didn't matter what age, and it started him thinking, can people feel my energy? Can they feel that I'm watching? When we say somebody's watching me, are we actually feeling that for real? Over many years, in nearly 30 years since then, he has concluded that yes, they can not only feel it, but they can feel it as malevolent, or they can feel it as interesting, or they can feel it as invasive. So we've got these wings. Oh yes, for sure, Dorothy, they absolutely can. So there you go, they absolutely can. So when you go to that, you also can't, in my mind, go jumping all over the dead before you address the living in your own environment, in your own house. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just like when you walk into a party, if there's one person in the corner in a bad mood who's had a shitty day that's complaining about their day, and all of a sudden it spreads out. Everybody starts to get kind of in it's 10 o'clock. I gotta go. I gotta work in the morning. It's been great. It was so good seeing you, the niceties, the politeness, and they leave. And then you're at another party where everybody's talking about how great things are. It's great to get together. Everybody's laughing, having a good time. They look at their watch like, oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I gotta be up in 3 hours for work. So, energy is absolutely, first and foremost, I think our environment over our physical being. Our energy and what we put out is what we get back. And I agree with them. I think that you do have to look at the physical manifestation before you look to the dead. And there's way more dead than living.
Exactly. Well, that's the point that I made earlier. You know, if it come down to that, we wouldn't get away, none of us. We'd have all been taken over. The Walking Dead wouldn't be an abstract TV show. It would be for real. If they do that, people with that kind of malevolence most definitely would. They don't want to be finished, Right. They don't want to be gone. In fact, when you look at the people that want to be gone, they're always the depressed people that don't want to be here. So they'd leave us all alone. We'd have no depression. They'd all leave us alone. But angry people is a whole different ballgame. When it comes also, I think, to because people can push their thoughts at you. I've heard that many times. And when I was learning, I would see and hear people, and I know people heard and saw me. I had an interesting experiment that I did where I thought of this man's name every night before I went to sleep. And then one day, it took about a week, he typed to me and he says, a woman's saying my name when I'm dreaming. What does that mean? That was the experiment. And so we can do that, whether we intend to do it or not. I intended to do something just to see if there was a knowledge in there. I can remember being sent and feeling energy being sent to me, and I knew somebody was doing that way back in the day. And probably about 9 months later, a girl admitted that because I'd attuned her, she had practiced sending energy to me. So I didn't know where it was coming from, but I could feel it. Now, if I was prone to deciding where it came from, putting it in a particular place, then it would be not too big a stretch, would it, to suddenly have a ghost or to have an angel giving me energy that I could physically feel. I'd get goosebumps and I'd get little tinglies on my skin. So if I knew that was energy, that's what I worked with, but another person may feel that differently, right?
Right. Well, and I do. I think that sometimes people, like I said, it was huge for me with that particular house cleansing because they were all terrified, and they were all convinced there were these evil energies that were in the house that were trying to destroy them and kill them, and they were scared to sleep, and they were scared to do all of this, and and he's like, I'm just trying to keep them alive. So he was literally.
There's that sensing though, isn't it? Like that, they're sensing that something's there. Mm-hmm. It's only the interpretation that gets all a bit skew with, right?
Right. And so he was definitely connecting with that energy, and he was definitely feeling that somebody was there, that something was there that he couldn't see. And that is we're such a physical society where we're coming into a spiritual revolution where people are starting to believe that we have, a collective energy or a higher power that's helping us, and that we're all part of more of love and spirit energy than physical. But we still have a very hard time getting past the physical. We have to have a physical manifestation or reason why anything like that happens, like the sleep paralysis. We're like, it's a demon on us, and it's trying to invade our body and take our souls. Well, I'd like to know why everybody thinks the soul's housed in the body. We all have auras. We all have energy that emits out. Is it our soul? I feel our soul is first and our physical sense of self is secondary. So I think our souls house our bodies. Yeah.
Does it actually matter? If you've got dead people running around without bodies, and what they are is essentially us without the body, then we've got that too, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. We're all part of that energy. Everything's energy. Yeah. It is pretty fascinating how one person can feel it. They're like, this house went from one person saying there was evil energy in the house to all of them not being able to stay. The energy of the fear spread very quickly.
Powerful energy. That and anger. That's where flash riots come from. You get a couple of people can get everybody else going. I don't know about how they deal with this in America, but in New Zealand, if a band has a riot out the front of them, they get explored. Everything they said gets explored if there's any video to see if they incited it in any way, shape or form, because it's that easy to do. So if you get one person who's got an overriding fear and they pass it on to the others, you've got trouble. Many years ago when I had my aura camera and I was doing a show, and this man came and he said, I don't want an aura photo, and all I'm thinking is, oh well, TikTok.
Right.
While you're here, TikTok. This is what I'm here for. And he said, I want to know what you think. He said, we lived in an apartment, my partner and I, we just had a baby. We had a couple of people round for dinner, and wait for it, do not laugh, Kathleen, if I see a smirk on your face, I will energetically slap you. He said, we got out the Ouija board and decided to try and connect. Yeah, we tried to connect with the dead person because we felt there was something in the apartment. I sort of get all of that. They're feeling it. They want to know more about it. But clearly they just scared the bejeebers out of themselves. So they think, go and have a few wines. The baby's asleep. And he said, next thing, the room just went dead cold, which I've experienced, and I'm sure you've experienced it before. Dead cold. He said it just went icy. And that was enough for them. They all freaked out, ran down the stairs, went, the baby! One ran back up, got the baby. They came out, they went to their friend's place, stayed the night, and said, we can't go back in there now. And they gave up the apartment. And he asked that was, and I said, well, I do think that you got what you asked for, that some entity connect with you, but the rest of it, you just scared the pants out of yourself. You just scared each other, and you accelerated and exaggerated exactly what was going on. A room going suddenly cold isn't going to kill anybody, ever.
Right. Right.
So there's that fear that dictates the behavior from that moment onwards. The more fearful a person is, the more inclined they are to build on the sensate experience.
Right. Well, and that's what I had one of my clients, he called me one night and he says, I want to know if I opened a portal. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, we were playing with the Ouija board, and I'm freaking out right now because my dog is staring at the couch and growling and barking at the couch, and that's the Ouija board is underneath the couch. And he was convinced that there was this, we met, and I go, well, first of all, I said, people have a lot, you have to be careful when you're messing with energies when you don't know what you're doing. And the second thing is I said, I'm not sensing anything like that. I think you should be brave and move the couch and see what the dog's barking at. And he says, oh, no, it's where I got to get rid of that Ouija board. And I said, well, in my opinion, it's a toy. It's a board game. It's a board game that's been around for years and hundreds of years.
Huh.
So I'm like, well, when you put the energy into it, you invite energy in. So it's like opening your front door and saying, come on in. I don't know who you are, but come on in. But I said, I'm really not. Yeah, I'm really not getting any sense. I said, when I'm not getting any sense that there's anything sinister under your couch. So he's like, okay, well then his partner comes home and they move the couch, and here the dog's ball had rolled underneath the couch. Their dog was barking because he wanted his ball. And of course he got rid of the Ouija board just in case because it freaked him out. But it was hilarious. I'm like, so it was the dog's ball. And he's like, yeah. Dog just wanted his ball. I was like, okay.
That's right. And fear dictates. So I've got a favorite saying that belief dictates your experience. And when that belief is centered around a fear, then your experience can only ever be negative. Because you're now not investigating, you're now not exploring, you're now not asking questions.
Right.
Brian says, has anyone ever been physically hurt by a ghost or a spirit? I have never ever heard of it. I've never ever seen it. What about you, Kathleen?
I have not. I've had people, say they have.
I think if you fell over running away from the ghost, you could hurt yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did have a student years ago who went on a mediumship thing for a show. She was one of the mediums. She had a story, and in her story, she said that she felt and got a scratch on her arm. And honestly, even listening to her, I could feel her own doubt in her own words. You could just feel her sort of recognizing that she may not have got that from a spirit. It could have come about because three of them ran around behind the couch and grabbed each other's arms. Suddenly you've got nails and fingernails and other things that could easily go on. So no, I've never seen or heard of it. For the amount of house clearings I've done in the past, I don't really do them up here. I said first, when I was in Auckland, I got called to a lot of house clearings in Auckland, and the Indian women really strongly believe that there could be negative. They don't think of it as ghosts, negative spirits or negative energy that needs to be pushed out of their home, which is fair enough. Most of them recognize it as somebody who would have lived there before. So what do you think about residual energy? Do you use that term, or do I need to explain the term?
No, I use that term quite a bit, and almost with most of my house cleansings, I do their physical manifestations from somebody that's physically living in the house that's dealing with anger, trauma, divorce. There's something going on, like the house cleansing I did where that spirit stepped forward. He says, there's other things in the house, and I said, that's physical manifestation of your partner, of your wife. And she is extremely angry. She's a bright light, but she's angry. She's lost right now. Yeah. And it's going to come out somewhere, and it often comes out in the privacy of our own home and the time that we're sleeping. But yeah, I've never, residual energy has been left behind. And sometimes that energy is not good. I've had people bring me objects where they're like, I don't feel good when I'm with, and there's residual energy. Some people are born angry and some people die angry, and there's the residual energy they leave behind on their belongings. They attach more to their belongings than they do to people or emotional connection. So in my experience, in my experience, it's been a lot of angry or physical manifestation that's been let go.
There's that interesting thing, because we understand that if you go into a house, for example, that it can feel good or it can feel bad. And we know some of that could be geographical, the way it's positioned and whether it is water running under it and so on and so on. But there's also that we do kind of get that if people have been beaten up their kids or themselves, or if nasty things happen in the house, and that's why nobody likes a house where somebody's been murdered. It's not about ghosts for most people. It's that horrible energy that you feel, that last person's extreme fright, their extreme fear, their extreme moment, whereas people die in houses all the time. We're not too concerned about that if it's, kind of normal, as in they got sick and died. They could fall off their roof and died. We're not so concerned about that. But when it's murder, we're suddenly concerned, because we can feel that uncomfortableness in the space. So definitely I've got a very strong belief in residual energy, and I don't honestly believe you can clear any other sort. If it's geographical, you can't, unless you can shift the earth out of the way, which is, not likely, then that's going to stay there and it's going to stay uncomfortable. But if you've got somebody's habitual movements, you ask the man to move the couch. Now, just say it wasn't the ball and the dog, but just moving. That's what feng shui is about. If something feels bad, you can break up the energy in an environment by moving things around. I've visited, now this I'd still do a whole lot of, where you visit a house to check the energy and read the energy. And I can almost every time tell you where they have arguments in a house. And I always tell them, pop a bit of furniture there, break up that energy, and they'll have less arguments, because as soon as they get into that space, things just start to escalate out of control a bit. And so that's the kind of thing that you can look at, and probably because of the people before. They may have always argued in that spot. So you get in there and we're in that riot mentality where we're picking up that energy without knowing why, so as soon as there's a bit of contentiousness, suddenly. So this is really important. Anybody that's listening to the show can go and do that at home. If you've got an area with your partner that you always have your arguments in, or if you do have an argument there, it escalates, if it gets out of control and you find, oh, you know what, it is always at that table or it is always in that kitchen, then you can make an agreement or you can shift things around so that you can't be in that space in the same way. It makes a big difference. I went and cleared a house where there was a horrible number of murders, but I didn't know till after I went to the house. It happens here too, right? Multiple murders. This happened when I was a really young girl, so I didn't realize that this place, I remembered the incident, but I had no idea where it was, is what I'm really trying to say. But she'd rented a back house, and she had 2 pee addicts living in there, and they had all run away. They had run 10 kilometers to the police station because they said there's a man's head in the window and he's threatening to kill them. They also said, she said, every time I go up and down the stairs, somebody tries to push me down the stairs, a dead person, obviously. So the owner of the house, in her infinite wisdom, got me in there, and I went up and down these stairs, and I said, well, I think that they're pee addicts when it comes to the window thing, and they've scared themselves. Now, clearly, I didn't know about the murders at this time, but they did, just so as we understand that. These pee addicts, they did know. You know what, you call it pee, ice, methamphetamines. They were that kind of addict. And so they knew about the history of the house, and so just pee. Methamphetamines, we call it pee. Australians call it ice. And I don't know, what do you call it? Yeah. Anyway, I went up and down these stairs and I did feel this rush past me. And as I got up to the top, I said, I know that somebody was running in through that door there, and then they would be at the bottom and then they'd run up the stairs. And that's what I was feeling, not a push down the stairs, but I was feeling almost like I had to get out of the way. And so if you're sensitive, you can pick up that kind of energy. Well, the lady was really interested. She said, when we were kids, we used to do this. We used to run up this part of the house that got burned down and rebuilt. So it was rebuilt as a 2-story, middle 60s, maybe 70s period of house. And, of course, the old part of the house was nearly 100 years old, so they were really different. It was like you walked through a door and you're in a different house. And then when you went up, she opened up the door in what I thought was a cupboard or a closet in the upstairs bedroom. And what they'd done was pulled out the old chimney and left a hole, and the kids would run up. They'd put pillows in the bottom. They'd run up the stairs and jump down into what was now a closet downstairs where the old chimney used to be. And that was their game, to run up the stairs. They'd race each other upstairs, pushing each other out of the way, jump down this hole onto their pillows, then run back up the stairs. That was their big buzz. So I was feeling that. I don't doubt that this pee addict, this pee chick, felt it as well. But her decision was, because she knew of the murders, that this was the
she
wrathful
attached it
energy.
to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a very interesting thing because as I walked towards this house, so there was a house at the front. This is just how you feel energy. That's all I'm trying to explain. As I walked from the front house, which was probably about 50, 60 years old, there was a big gap and there was an old shed, and then there was this old, new sort of weird house at the back. As I walked past, I got past the back fence line of the front house, and honestly, I felt like I was walking through mud, and I had a little difficulty breathing, and I'd said to her then, I said, I don't know what's going on here, but you might need to think about getting something done around this driveway, because I said, I feel like I'm dragging myself through mud, literally. And she said, okay, and didn't say a word. She didn't say a word. I looked over to the right, and I could see a man with blue overalls. I told her I could see that, and she said, oh, that's my dad, and we carried on to the back house. So there was a bit of stuff going on. After I'd finished all of this, she told me that she was the survivor and all her family had been murdered by her grandfather when she was 8 years old. And at the time that I met her, she was nearly 30. And so I was like, okay. And she said, it's interesting. And she said that middle part where you said it was like walking through mud, she said that was where the house, they pulled it down. That was where the murders happened. So the grandfather had built the front house for him and his wife when they retired. The middle house was one of his sons and their family, which she was a part of. And the back house was his other son and their family, and he killed all of them. And she hid in a closet. That's how she survived. So it's a tragic story. But with all of that, the energy being heavy and all the rest of it, if you're exploring something, it's not scary is where I'm going. You know, it was heavy. It was laden, but it wasn't scary. I didn't feel I was being threatened or anything like that.
Right.
But I could have if I was intimidated by walking through air and feeling this weight, you know. So that's a big deal when it comes to, because it's a physical feeling, I suppose. That's the thing. It's not I'm mentally picking up that something happened here, because I was focused on where I was going and the job I was doing. I wasn't looking for anything else. And so when I felt that weight moving through there, when I felt the sludginess, I've got a million words to describe it, and it's all quicksandy, it's all heavy, muddy, it's that kind of feeling, and my whole body was trying to get through it.
Oppressive.
And so it was one of those interesting things. So it comes down to very much, it's a physical feeling, it's a physical hearing, it's a physical sensing. And I suppose, too, that's what adds to that fear that I'm physically vulnerable, do you think?
I do, and I also think, like, you brought up a really good point about residual energy and certain houses, you know, you can't change the land, you can't change, and I've seen that a lot too. There's some houses where it's just, there's, you know, everybody that lived in the house has been divorced, or there's been anger, or there's been, and I think that sometimes when we leave the physical realm in trauma or fear, it's like a radio waves of energy that go out from the physical sense, and that's something that becomes like a loop, like almost like putting a CD on repeat. And so people see it, like everybody talks about the ghost in Gettysburg, you know, the soldier that walks down Main Street. You know, people from all over the world that have never met each other have told the same story. And I'm like, well, it's probably a residual energy loop. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I said, do you really think somebody in the afterlife is going to spend their entire afterlife doing the same thing over and over again? Exactly. Like, and they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. So it was probably a residual energy loop. It was when he was dying from the trauma of war. He was trying to get to help, you know, he was walking, that was his last. So it's a residual energy loop that's left behind. I did a land reading once. Well, it was an old farmhouse and their land. And, I told the owner, I said, you know, just write down don't give me any information, write down what I see. And when I walked into the house, I said, the only part of this house that I feel has any kind of history or residual energy was the kitchen and this fancy dining room off the side of it. So I told him what I saw there. And I said, I see a viewing, but it looks like the viewing is more recent than the 1800s when they would view, you know, bodies in people's homes back then. Then we went out. He has tons of acreage, and I saw, like, we stopped in the middle of this field, and I said, oh my gosh, I said, I can feel fire. And then I said, and I see at least 50 cows dead. And he was writing it down furiously, and they were going on. And then I went into his barn, and the barn was very, very old. It was restored, very, very old. And I said, do you have trouble keeping anything in the barn, like animals, anything? And he says, yeah. He says, I can't. My animals will do everything to get out of this barn. And I saw 4 people hanging in that barn. And I said, I see, and it was a family. It was a mother, a father, and a son and a daughter. And the daughter looked about 6 years old. The son looked about 13 or 14, and the parents were fairly young, in their mid-20s. And they were all hanging. And I said, I feel that there was a hanging in the barn. And I see that. But again, residual energy. I don't think it was spirit energy. It was residual energy, and this family was murdered in their own barn. After we did the whole reading, he sat down. He says, they had a natural gas catch on fire or some kind of explosion, and they lost 50 head of cattle.
Wow.
Oh, and I saw the fire and the cattle separately. I saw the energy separately. The cattle just looked like they died of natural causes. But he's like, no, there was this massive explosion that took out 50 head of cattle, and he was like, I can't believe you saw that. But see, and even I didn't, everybody expects you to know chronologically what you're seeing, yes, and who they are and what they did. Like you said, the mud, you felt like you were walking through this quagmire of mud. And it was oppressive energy because of that residual trauma or radio wave of energy, which is often what happens in these more haunted locations or what people consider haunted locations like the asylums and the prisons. And, I know, some people that go to the Stanley Hotel. There's a lot of places where there was trauma, and I'm sure people are picking up on the trauma, but is it because they know there was trauma there, or is it because they're actually feeling it? Yeah. Exactly.
And that's why I think she was very careful to make sure, because New Zealand's little, a big event like that didn't get forgotten. I did know about it, but of course, again, I didn't know it was there, and I didn't know it was in that area. I had no idea. I was young when it happened. But the interesting thing is that, of course, as soon as you know, it can change your perception, which is what happened to the girl that was stoned off her little nut, We've got Popeye saying, my old house had a guy die because he was home alone and bench pressing weights. Now, this is for everybody who thinks they should be more motivated to work out. Don't do it. He lost control and dropped the bar on his throat. His wife came home and found him dead. My now ex-wife wanted to get a weight bench after we'd been there for a year or two. I refused. I wasn't going to tempt fate. So for everybody who keeps thinking to themselves, I should do more exercise, there's your valid and honest reason not to. Now we've got Dolores, and we've got a question here, Kathleen, that you can pop in your answer to. I know a very large group of mediums on Facebook, and although they want to communicate with spirits, so many of them say that they would be terrified if they saw one. She says maybe because I was brought up with ghosts, I don't really get that. But what do you think of that? As a group.
I think that everybody connects on a different level. It's always, I'm with Dolores. I have always seen both and have been very comfortable with both worlds. It's like being raised with 2 languages for me. It's very normal. If, somebody, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, what's it like? It's got to be confusing. It's got to be exhausting. And is there any space for anything? And I don't know how to even explain it to somebody, because to me, it's very normal. Now, I do know there are large groups of mediums that have had they feel their gifts have come to them, or their abilities. I don't like the term gifts. I like the term abilities, because I think we all have abilities of some sort, whether they're, with spirit or customer service. We all have abilities. So when people would say that to me, I'm like, well, it's kind of being raised knowing 2 different languages. It's very normal to me. I don't know any other life. It's always been there. Now, some mediums I had a near-death experience, and now spirit came to me, and now I can talk, and all of this is going on. And I'm sure some near-death experiences have brought people's abilities to the forefront. That is not my case. So I'm with her.
I've been gifted with giving other people near-death experiences. Tick-ting.
I've had a couple near-death experiences, but they're all by bad choices because it was the 80s.
There you go. Yeah, no, I just like scaring the bejeebers out of people, I've walked around at night and I've tapped on people's windows. I've gone, dun, 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 and watched them freak right out. And then I've gone, hello. So I'm guilty of doing stuff like that because I'm a bit of a joker. And I can run really fast. If I couldn't run really fast, I probably would have ended that a long time ago. So it's kind of an interesting thing. With regards to, personal spirituality, am I still here?
I can't see you any longer now.
That's okay. No, that's okay. It was just my screen went to a reconnect, but I was just making sure my Skype, that's all good. So okay. I'm coming back in if I can. I don't know if I can get the camera back, but that's the least of our worries right now. It just did a little reconnect thing, but you can still hear me. I can still hear you, and it's doing it again. So we'll not worry about the cameras. I don't know if you can all see Kathleen, but as it stands, we've got 10 minutes to go, so don't freak out. If I disappear, Kathleen will carry on. Isn't that right? If something happens to me, I can see everything behind a little screen moving still. So anyway, so where were we? Oh, yeah, scaring people and freaking them out and having near death. I've got to say that none of that happened to me, and I was not sensitive from birth or anything like that. In fact, I was a good near 40 years old before I even started my journey. And I'm still not scared of that side of things. I really genuinely believe that you've got motivations. That there are people that go to mediumship shows to be scared, right?
Correct. I believe so, yes.
It's not the same thing as being a medium. It's not the same thing as getting information. If you're going to be scared of subtle energies, and without mediumship, with all other things that I do, there is some very weird stuff that goes on. And if you're going to explore it, if you're going to try and interpret it for another person, being scared yourself is definitely not an advantage. In actual fact, it makes you a poor witness, if you know what I mean. Would you agree with all?
Yes, yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. Popeye says, I used to be a nurse at nursing home in southern Iowa. We had a ghost who would always appear in a top hat and tails at the door of the room. Whenever the staff saw him, they would notify the nurse immediately. Many staff members saw him, and within 5 minutes of his appearance, a person would die in the room he appeared by. God, you wouldn't want to be one seeing him, would you? I concluded that his job was to help those souls cross the veil into the next room. Still, it was unsettling when he was seen. Well, it would be, because when he was seen, everybody would think, I'm going to die, or one of us is going to die. It's a bit like a horror movie, isn't it? Who's going to be next?
Right, the finger, but I've seen in many cases when, and I'm just talking by personal experience, not that I've sat with a lot of people that are getting ready to pass, but when very close people that I've been with when I've sat with them or have seen them through their journey, and I'll just use Mike for an example, I saw great light around him, like it would almost, and I knew that there were lots of people there to take him home. So I always knew there would be light around these people, and a lot of people, people were like, you're not going to tell me when I'm going to die or anything. And I said, well, I'm a medium. I'm not the Grim Reaper. And they laughed because they're like, oh, okay, thank God. Don't tell me anything bad.
It is an interesting because it brings you back to, that everybody expects you to know everything. I can remember a lady, I'd worked on her horse energetically because I do energy therapy is my big thing. And I'd worked on her horse energetically, haven't seen her for months, 6 or 7 months. And I ran into her in the street and she says, oh, Philip, that was the name of the horse, Philip, blah, blah. And she said, oh, you already know. And I said, what makes you think I've been focused on you and your horse? It doesn't make any sense to me that you would expect me to know stuff like that because I banged into you. I have a life. I have things that I'm thinking of. But the other side of that is there's this whole interesting idea around the death. I had a friend who did die. This is a bit tragic. He wasn't terribly old. This is about 10 years ago now. And normally I would see him and his wife around a fair bit, and he was always very chatty with me, etc. And he always would tell me his new music, his new poetry that he was writing, because I paint. So we had this artistry thing going on. He would give me poems for my art showings and things like that, and he would read and play music. Anyway, I hadn't seen them for ages, and I went to a whakapapa, and when I went along to that, they were sitting right in front of me, and she turned around and said hello, and I said hello to him, and he turned around, said hello, and then he looked away, and I thought, oh, something's wrong with this guy. What have I done? Was all I thought. What have I done wrong? 3 weeks later, he was dead, and he wasn't sick. He actually had a car accident and died.
Oh, wow.
Now, after he died, about 3 of our mutual friends come and saw me separately visiting. They were friends, not client friends. And one of them actually said, I told him to come and see you. And I said, did you? And she said, yeah, because he was having these dreams, and he was having them for about 6 months, and he kept dreaming that his grandfather was standing in front of him and beckoning to him and saying, John, it's time to come home. John, it's time to come home. And that's for 6 months before he drives off the road into a tree and dies, So there's an element of what a person knows inside themselves, which is, with illness, I think we all know what we've got and what's going on. But at the same time, then it begs the question, how do we know 6 months out? How are we dreaming that we are going to have this death accident? And why is this person giving you warning anyway about something you could never hope to know would happen? Now, by the way, this man didn't smoke or drink. He was dead sober and driving home at 10 o'clock, and he died less than 5 minutes from home. Just drove off the road, and that was the end for him. So it's an interesting question, isn't it? We've got all of these things inside us. Now, I know then he didn't want to talk to me in case I did see something.
Sure. Sure.
Right.
And I've run into that over the years as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he already knew.
And so I felt a bit robbed.
Most of us
because I thought, oh. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't.
Sorry.
I've had one of my dear clients that I've had for a number of years. Her son passed away at 25, and he was a very carefree spirit. But 3 months before he died, he got life insurance and made sure his mom was taken care of and everything was done. And she's like, she didn't know anything about it until after he passed. And she said, do you think that he knew? And I said, I think his soul always knows. I don't think he knew per se, but he had an inkling towards it. And I agree with you on that. I think that our souls do know ahead of time, which again begs to tell us about how, we have a map, or we know what's coming. We've mapped this life out before we get here. So do we have free will?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I used to have a really strong belief that we were mapped out, but now I'm not really quite there for it. But I do know we can see ahead. And because we have a set series of behaviors ourselves that we know about ourselves. Just like when a person is self-destructive, we know looking at them that they're going to come to a bad end, and when they do, everybody expects that. You know what I mean? And within ourselves, because it's like if you're going to step up and take a wander to the end of the road, without having to think about it, that you have to move your body in a particular way. And then we have set behaviors and things we do and don't do. Now, while it doesn't guarantee that we should be able to see that moment in time, I'm always fascinated that I can see that moment in time. And if I can see it, that means some part of us today is creating it. So we're creating today something we're going to live a little while later. Can we change it? Probably. But can we change it just like that? Probably not, because we'd have to change so much more about ourselves to change. We'd have to change a whole behavior structure, a whole thought structure, a whole belief structure would all have to change to make sure we're not in that moment. That's why I love things like, did you see that movie, The Butterfly Effect?
Yes.
That kind of thing where people deliberately try to change something in the future and then everything else goes horribly wrong and they have to race back to the past and put it back together again, right? And that fascinates me because, of course, there's a natural progression in time. There's a
Oh, I think we lost you. I think we lost Dorothy. I think she was talking about how time, a lot of people will connect time also to our turning of what we're expecting or what we're putting in our map. I guess it wouldn't, I don't know. I think we all have free will and we have the ability to change what we feel is coming, but I do think certain things are written in predisposed that we wrote before we came back here. And I think that higher vibrational energy souls usually have a lot more trauma or a lot more around their energy to help teach us, and that's, I feel, has a lot to do with it as well too. So I do think that the residual energy, we all have the ability to feel that, and we all have the ability to feel when there's spirit energy around. I don't think everybody's meant to connect like Dolores brought up earlier. You brought up about this group of mediums that were really scared. Well, what would I do if I actually saw one? But yet they're wanting to connect with spirit. We tend to get into a physical sense of we want to control everything. We want to be able to control even what we can't see or what we don't know. So we have this preconceived notion that we're going to be able to control when spirit comes to us or gives us the messages, and we don't have any control over that. So, and they do get really they try to there's so many people that are like, well, I'm connecting to energies now, so I must be psychic. Well, everybody's part of that collective energy or a higher power. We're all intertwined and we're all connected by energy. But everything is energy. If you take a microscope and look at a table underneath a microscope, you'll see moving parts. So we're all we're all connected to energy, and that's it. Now, with some mediums, they don't see the people, or they don't see the light, or they don't see the spirit. They feel it, or they hear it, or they receive different messages. But I do know that we all usually put a physical sense of self to what we see. When I talk to clients and I'm like, well, I smell smoke and I see them smoking and this is what they're doing. It's because that's what that person physically will manifest to what they connect with that loved one that's passed on. So I completely understand how you're like, well, maybe it's just me, but it's always been there for me. I do feel that, as Dorothy said, when she was 40 when hers started to come about, mine was always there. Now, I do have, I can remember at a very young age seeing very, very traumatic experiences and death. So I remember being terrified, I was always more comfortable with the dead than I was the living, because what I was being shown was the living perpetrating crimes and trauma against the living. So the dead didn't bother me. I was more comfortable with them. I was terrified of the living. I was terrified of what people did to each other and what I saw. So I remember I was probably 8 or 9 and I was like, I don't want to see death anymore. I don't want to see it. And they said, well, how about we only show you if you can change it? I'm like, okay.
There's a question around that, isn't there? Because a lot of people's first experiences with psychic knowledge or spiritual knowledge, put it wherever you like, is hard to take. It's kind of gruesome, or it's difficult, or it's a death coming up. It's really challenging to take, and there's a lot of questions around that, which we will address in our next show in a fortnight. Now, Americans don't say a fortnight, so that's 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it's a fortnight. Don't ask. I've got English. We're going to be back with Altered States. Now, you can see here we've got Kathleen-Moore's number, 330-548-8202 for a reading with Kathleen, the awesome and wonderful Ms. Kathleen, and her website, www.kathleen-moore's-psychic-medium.com. Pop along. You can find and see all of her lovely slides of her walking on bridges that other people wouldn't walk on. Photos with her family. Beautiful, beautiful site, and I will update the story because by the time I looked at your site and realised you'd changed it again, I was too late to do anything about your post. But there you go.
Fine.
So we've got this today. Now next week it's back to a psychic affair, Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. If you don't see me at 9, here at 8:30, do let me know I'm on and off track time-wise. We're going to be looking at aura photos. Now, Christy Faust, is it? Faust? How do you say your surname, Christy? Now, next week with Kathleen, in a fortnight with Kathleen, we are going to talk about psychic experiences, psychic development, how you discern the experiences that you're having. What are you picking up on? Is it mediumship? Is it another person? Is it an astral thingy, right? Because I've got a bit to say about that. When you are looking at auras, is that any different to looking at a person's body? Is it any different listening to Kathleen's voice in the back going, where the hell's she in? To listening to a dead person saying, listen to me, and a guide, a person, what's it all about? So Kathleen and I are going to explore that for you next week. Thank you so much, Kathleen. You're not gone yet. And a psychic affair next Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. We're looking at aura photos. Now, Christy, since you asked for that, would you like me to do an aura picture? If so, grab a picture from your chest up and bring that along, or send that along to me during the week, and I will do an aura picture so that everybody can look at what I do today. But I've also got some aura photos from when I used to have my camera, so we'll talk about that as well. Brian, definitely. So I can do a couple. All I need is, if you look at Kathleen's picture here, her video, that's sort of perfect as long as there's a bit of space above you so I can fit the aura into the picture because I add the aura to your existing photo. Kathleen, I hope you had fun. It was fantastic sharing with you. I want everybody to know Kathleen is not my guest. She is the co-host of Altered States, and she will have as much as I, and we will share the stage. Da-da-da-dum. So I want you all to have a wonderful week, and if you can't, please remember this week, don't be a don't blah, 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 blah. Do you know what's going on here? We've got hurricanes and cyclones running up and down the coast.
Yes.
And the piece of coast I live on is like that wide.
Oh, my gosh.
So we've got the west and the east. We will be fine. We get storms all the time. But I'm looking out the window, and that's why I'm dropping off the internet, because it's just like this mishmash of stuff out there. So remember, I'll get it right this time. This week, don't be a part of your own problem. Ciao for now, everybody. And Kathleen?
Peace and love.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.